Welcome. Today's case is Überlingen, the 1st of July 2002, over Lake Constance in southern Germany. A Bashkirian Airlines Tupolev 154 and a DHL Boeing 757 collided at cruise altitude, killing all 71 people on board the two aircraft. Before we look at any detail, hold the framing in the title. Two aircraft, but one system's holes. This case is not the story of a bad decision by a crew or a bad instruction from a controller. It is the story of how a set of individually tolerable weaknesses, organizational, technical, and human, aligned on a single night. We will use James Reason's Swiss cheese model as our analytical lens throughout. Let's establish the sequence of events because everything that follows depends on understanding this contradiction precisely. The two aircraft were converging at the same flight level. TCAS, the Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System, did exactly what it was designed to do. It coordinated between the two aircraft and issued complementary resolution advisories, telling the DHL crew to descend and the Bashkirian crew to climb. Had both crews followed TCAS, the aircraft would have separated. But the Zurich controller, detecting the conflict late, instructed the Bashkirian crew to descend, the direct opposite of their TCAS advisory. Faced with two authoritative voices giving contradictory instructions, the crew followed the human. Both aircraft descended into the same block of airspace. Take a moment on point 4. 71 people died not because a system failed, but because two systems, human and automated, gave conflicting commands with no unambiguous rule for which one prevails. Here is the puzzle I want you to sit with. The instinctive response, and the response of much of the early public commentary, is to ask why the crew followed the controller over the safety system, or why the controller issued the instruction at all. But pull the camera back. On that night, a single SkyGuide controller was working two sectors alone. His colleague was resting, in line with an informally tolerated practice. The telephone system he needed to coordinate with adjacent units was degraded, and the short-term conflict alert, the ground-based safety net that would have warned him earlier, was switched off for maintenance. None of these conditions in isolation causes an accident. Each had existed before without consequence. The analytical question of this chapter is, what happens when they all align? We now work through Reason's model layer by layer, starting at the sharp end. The active failure, the unsafe act closest to the accident, was the crew's decision to follow the ATC descend instruction rather than the TCAS climb advisory. But notice the language on the slide. A decision, not a blunder. In 2002, training and documentation across operators were inconsistent on TCAS priority. In the Bashkirian crew's operational culture, the controller's authority carried enormous weight. Under time pressure, with two credible sources in conflict, they made a locally rational choice. This is the essence of the sharp-end perspective. The active failure is where the accident becomes visible, but it is rarely where it begins. If your analysis stops here, you have described the accident. You have not explained it. Now, we descend into the latent conditions, the holes that were already open in the cheese before either aircraft took off. First, one controller, two sectors. The second SkyGuide controller was on a break, a practice management had tolerated during low-traffic night shifts. When workload spiked, there was no backup. Second, the short-term conflict alert was disabled for scheduled maintenance. The controller's ground-based safety net was gone, and the degraded phone system prevented him from coordinating a handoff. Third, fatigue, structurally produced by reduced night staffing. Each of these was a management decision, made weeks or months earlier, that seemed reasonable at the time. This is Reason's central insight. Latent conditions are resident pathogens. They sit dormant in the system until an active failure at the sharp end connects them into a trajectory of accident opportunity. The third layer of this case is what happened afterwards, and it is arguably the layer with the most enduring influence on our field. Rather than treating Überlingen purely as a system failure to be learned from, Swiss prosecutors brought criminal charges against SkyGuide staff. The safety community's reaction was strongly critical, and for good reason. When individuals inside a drifting system are prosecuted for its outcomes, the predictable result is that frontline staff stop reporting the very anomalies that investigations depend on. There is also a darker coda you may wish to mention to your audience. In 2004, the controller on duty that night was murdered by a man who had lost his family in the collision. A tragedy that underscored how blame, once unleashed, escapes all control. Eurocontrol. Today cites Überlingen as the reference case for the tension between individual accountability and organizational learning, the founding tension of just culture. Let's now name the deeper mechanism explicitly because this is the transferable insight. No single failure caused Überlingen. Understaffing was tolerable. It had been tolerated many times. A disabled conflict alert was tolerable. Maintenance has to happen. An unreachable backup, a degraded phone line, each survivable alone. What Reason's model makes visible is alignment. The moment when the holes in successive defensive layers line up and a trajectory of opportunity passes clean through the system. And note the final point on the slide. Drift, not villainy. Every one of these conditions was created by a reasonable person making a locally sensible decision. The system drifted toward failure through the accumulation of ordinary compromises. If you take one sentence from this case, make it that one. 3 lessons that outlive the case. First, hunt the latent conditions. In any investigation, or any safety audit of a living system, the proximate choice is the beginning of the analysis, never the end. Ask what holes the organization left open beforehand. Second, just culture protects learning. The Überlingen prosecutions demonstrated, at great cost, that criminalizing individuals inside a drifting system suppresses the reporting culture on which all proactive safety management depends. Third, and most relevant to modern flight decks, automation. Human conflicts must be resolved by design. After Überlingen, the rule was made unambiguous worldwide. When TCAS issues a resolution advisory, the crew follows TCAS, and controllers stand down. That clarity exists because 71 people died without it. As we move into an era of increasingly capable automation, the design question, who has final authority and is it unambiguous, has never mattered more. To close, Überlingen anchors. Chapter 11 of the book on maintenance, engineering, and safety management, where safety management systems and just culture are examined together, precisely because this case joins the two. It shows how latent organizational conditions defeat technical defenses and how the response to failure determines whether a system learns or merely punishes. The full treatment, alongside the other case studies in this series, is in Aviation Human Factors, Theory, Research, and Applications for Advanced Aviation Systems, Ziakkas and Pechlivanis, CRC Press, 2026. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.